with our player now clamped to the screen, we can add something that will make our player look a little bit more interesting, which is a bit of a jet flame coming out of the back of the ship. So we're just going to go into our little art assets here, and we're going to grab one of these. I'm going to grab, there's 3 different flames here. I'm going to grab the shortest one, which should be the first one in our list. And we go back to our scene, and I'm going to drop it into the world here. And I'm just going to rename this to be our jet flame. And I'll move it into position just behind our ship. Like this. There we go. And I'm going to click and drag this onto the player. So now it's, if we click off it, you can see it's, actually no, we don't want it overlapping with the player. We'll put it kind of out the back a little bit like that. So that's all fine and dandy. It's kind of hanging out there like that. Perfect. And now if we were to move around in the game, we look like we have a bit of a jet trail going behind us. But at the same time, it kind of looks a bit bland. It's just this static little thing. So let's add a little bit of animation to our jet flame. Now we haven't done any animation yet in this project or in this course, but animation is relatively simple to do in Unity, especially when you're dealing with sprite animation. All we have to do first of all is open our animation window. So go up to window up here, and we'll scroll down here to where we have animation, and this will pop open a new tab, and I'm going to click and drag this tab so it docks in between our project and our console windows here. And then on animation, the first thing we need to do, if we're going to animate this jet flame, we need to go to create an animator for it. So we just hit the create button, and that will allow us to create an animator, or it'll automatically create an animator for it, but we need to create a specific animation that we're going to use for our jet flame. So we're going to use an animation that we'll just call this our jet flame animation, because there's not going to be anything else to it. But where we want to save it, rather than saving it in this art folder, we're going to go back up to our assets, and we're going to show this is another way to add folders into the game. We're going to add a new folder through the interface here, and we're going to call this animations. So we'll save this in this animations folder. We can hit save, and if we go back to our project view, we'll see now we have a new folder in our assets that is where we're going to save all our animations in general. And you can see we have this jet flame animation that we just created, although at the moment it's not doing anything, and this is the animator that will control, or sorry, it's the controller that will control the animator that makes all our animations work. And we'll dive into that when we start doing a little bit more animation, but for now we can just ignore that and deal with specifically the animation we're doing for our jet flame. So let's go back and make sure we have our jet flame active in the window here, and we go to the animation window, and we see we have a timeline here of how animations will work. So at the moment there's no animation going on because we just have this one image. So what we're going to do is drag other images into our timeline that will make the animation kind of flow and happen. So to do that, we're going to go to our project folder here, and what we want to do is click and drag images onto our animation window. But at the moment, of course, we can't see anything because our project and our animation window are both on the same kind of a row of tabs here. And what I like to do personally when I'm doing this stuff is I just grab my project window and just pop it over where our game view is, or sorry, not over where our game view, where our scene view is. And actually, to make it a little bit more easy to see, we kind of want to be able to see our scene view as we're doing this. So what I'm going to do is now drag it down below and slightly over to the side, and what that does is creates a whole new section here that we can use to see our images. So now I can just scroll down through all the various different objects. So we already have our small little flame in place, but because we want to use an animation, we need to make sure that the first frame of our animation will actually use that small frame. So I'm going to click and drag that small bit of flame into the scene here, and it'll pop it in there. And you'll see it creates this little diamond shape, and that means it's a keyframe of animation, so that Unity knows, okay, at this point in the timeline, this image should be here. So we're going to move on one frame to the very next frame, and I'm going to scroll down here and find the next size up of our flame and click and drop that in there like that. Then we're going to move on to the next frame again and grab the biggest flame and pop that in there. And then we're going to move on one more frame and go back up to the middle flame and pop that there. So what's happening now is it's going small, middle, large, and then what it'll do, it'll go to middle again, and then finally it'll loop back around and go back to the very start again. So it'll play through this little sequence, and if you click and drag along the timeline and look up here, you can see the size of our flame looks like it's growing and shrinking as we go back and forward. So now if we hit the play button over here, we can see, hey, our jet engine is kind of growing and shrinking like crazy. It's kind of going really, really fast. It's going probably too fast for our needs and for our desires. So there's two options of what we could do. We could go and we could just stop this playing, and we could stretch out these keyframes and make them be further out, or we could change the sample rate. So at the moment it's saying it's running at 60 frames a second. We can slow that down to say 12 frames a second, which means now there's a much bigger gap between our frames here. So if we hit the play button, we're not, it's not being resized. Just let me click off and we click back. Sometimes Unity is a bit weird with this stuff. If we turn this off here, okay, yeah, there we go. So the way to fix that little bit of an error, it just took a couple of seconds to sort it out there, is if you just add a blank keyframe in there and then undo it, it'll adjust the timeline to be the right length. So that's kind of just a strange little bug here in Unity that shouldn't normally happen, but if that happens in your own project as we're working here, that's how you can fix that. So just go to the next frame, add an empty keyframe and undo it, and it should fix the problem. Okay, so we have it back on 12 frames. So now we can see, hey, that flame, it looks like it's growing and shrinking in a kind of reasonable way. So let's see that in action in the game. But when we're done animating, it's important to remember, always untick the record button here, because if we were to leave this here and let it keep recording any changes we make, basically what can happen is, if for example I go ahead and move this jet flame now, that's been added to the timeline. So now our animation is this jet flame moving around like crazy in the world, and that's no good. We do not want that to happen. So I'm going to undo that and make sure that that isn't saved, and I'm going to turn off record, and now I can feel free to move this jet flame wherever I want, and it'll just play the animation in whatever that place is. So I'll turn this back off again, we'll undo it, move it back to the right position. But let's play the game and see how that looks. So at the moment now, our jet flame animation is working. It's a bit small there, so let's maximize this. You can see our jet flame is working the way it should be, but it's kind of growing and shrinking into the body of the ship, and that kind of looks weird, and that's not very good. So let's fix that. So we've done with this little bit of animation, so I'm going to move this project window back where it should be. And the reason why it's growing and shrinking both on the left and the right is because it has a center point. All our jet flame sprites have a center point right in the middle of them, and we can actually move that center point when we are editing it in the sprite editor. So if we go back to the main sprite sheet that we have for all our images, and we go into the sprite editor here, if we go to each one of these jet flame objects on the left here, we can set the pivot point, instead of being the center, to be on the right, like this. There we go, all three of them. Okay, so we'll apply those changes, go back into Unity, and you'll see that now the jet flame is suddenly way more over to the left, and that's because the center point of the whole entire object is now at the very tip of the flame. And because we moved it into position with the understanding that the center point of it was kind of here, now it's moved over to the side a little bit, so we can just grab our jet flame and we'll put it back in to be closer to the ship. And now if we go back to animation and hit play, now it looks like our animation is stretching out behind the ship and kind of shooting away behind it as we go. And that's actually a little bit slow, so I'm going to speed this up a bit, like that. We're still getting this weird error with the... Okay, I think I've fixed the issue. It seems like the reason, or I don't really know what the reason is. It's as I said, it's a strange bug within Unity, but if you actually just click and drag the very last keyframe, so you drag it off to the right and then back to the left, Unity knows that, hey, this is where the last position of this should be. So now if I adjust the speed, nope, it didn't fix the problem, of course, because it's Unity and it's a bit weird about all these things. So let's just play the game and see if it actually works properly for us this time. There we go, now the animation is actually set up properly. So doing that seems to fix it at the correct frame rate, but Unity is a bit weird sometimes, so it can cause problems if we adjust it. So it's one of those little quirks of Unity. It's something you need to work around and pay attention to when you're creating your animations. But for now, you can see our jet flame is actually doing something, and now when we fly around, it actually feels a bit more sensible as we're going. But I'm feeling now the player is a little bit slow, so I might actually adjust the speed of the player here. Let's put it up to 10. Whoa, that's a bit too much. There we go. 7 feels a bit faster, so I'm going to stick with 7 for the movement speed of our ship, especially left and right. Just like that. Okay, perfect. So we've got our ship moving around just the way we want to, and we've got a bit of a jet plane, or jet flame coming out the back of it. But when we're moving our ship, at the moment, when we move up and down, it kind of looks a bit static. So let's add some animation to how our plane is moving to make it feel like it's a bit more alive and a bit more active.